Let me tell you something you may not like, but you need to hear it. The pressure you're under is not a punishment, it is permission. You thought the weight on your life meant God stepped away. No, the pressure is proof that God trusted you with something heavy. Diamonds don't form in comfort, oil doesn't flow without crushing, and faith doesn't mature without resistance. If there were no pressure, there would be no power. If there were no fire, there would be no refinement. If there were no stretching, there would be no growth. God allowed the pressure because what He placed inside you cannot survive a shallow season. You're being pressed because you're being prepared. You're being squeezed because there's something valuable that must come out of you in this season. You didn't break under it. You didn't quit because of it. You're still standing with tears in your eyes and faith in your heart. And that's how you know God is at work. The enemy wanted to crush you. God used the pressure to shape you. What you call stress, God calls strength training. What you call delay, God calls development. What you call pressure, heaven calls purpose being activated. This is not the end. This is the furnace before the favor. This is the pressure before the promotion. Now listen carefully. This is why God allowed it. When pressure shows up, it doesn't come to destroy you. It comes to expose you. Pressure has a way of pulling back the curtain on what's really living on the inside. When life is calm, anybody can smile. When things are easy, anybody can say they trust God. But when the walls start closing in, when the money gets funny, when the people you trusted walk away, when the prayers feel unanswered, that's when pressure does its real work. It reveals what's been planted in your spirit all along. See, pressure doesn't create what's inside you, it reveals it. A sponge doesn't become wet when you squeeze it. It only releases what was already there. And when life squeezed you, something came out. Maybe it was tears. Maybe it was anger. Maybe it was fear. But maybe, just maybe, it was faith you didn't even know you had. Maybe it was endurance. Maybe it was a prayer that came out of your mouth when your mind had no words left. That's how you know God has been working deeper than you realized. Some of you discovered strength you didn't train for. You didn't wake up one day saying, I'm strong enough for this. No, you were introduced to your strength through adversity. Pressure taught you how to stand when everything in you wanted to sit down. Pressure taught you how to keep showing up when nobody was clapping for you. Pressure taught you how to worship with a broken heart and still believe God was good. You learned who you really are when the safety nets were removed, when the applause stopped, when the support dried up, when it was just you, God, and the weight of the moment. That's when the real you showed up, not the filtered you, not the church you, not the social media you, the real you, raw, tired, stretched, and still breathing, still believing, still here. Pressure has a way of burning off the fake. Exposes shallow faith, borrowed faith, secondhand faith. When pressure comes, you can't live off somebody else's testimony. You can't survive on yesterday's praise. You have to know God for yourself. And if you're still standing after what you've been through, it means something. Authentic has taken root in you. It means God planted something real on the inside. Some people folded under the same pressure that made you stronger. Same storm, same wind, same fire, but different outcomes. Why? Because pressure doesn't affect everyone the same way. It depends on what's inside. Fire hardens clay but refines gold. And God knew what you were made of before He ever allowed the heat. He knew your breaking point, and He also knew your breakthrough point. There are things God could not reveal to you without pressure. You would have never known how deeply you could pray if desperation hadn't forced you to your knees. You would have never known how strong your faith was if everything didn't shake at the same time. You would have never known how much you could forgive until you were wounded in ways words couldn't fix. Pressure unlocked dimensions of you that comfort would have kept dormant. And let's be honest, some things had to be exposed. Some attitudes had to come out. So, insecurities had to surface. Some dependencies had to be revealed. Pressure showed you where you were leaning on people instead of God. Pressure showed you where your confidence was built on approval instead of purpose. Pressure showed you where your identity was tied to success instead of assignment. And God didn't expose it to shame you. He exposed it to heal you. What came out of you under pressure didn't surprise God. It surprised you. God already knew what was in you, but you didn't. And you needed to see it for yourself. You needed to know that when everything was stripped away, there was still something solid left. You needed to know that when the pressure hit, you didn't disappear. You adapted. You didn't die. You developed. You didn't lose your faith. You learned how to use it. Pressure also reveals maturity. Immature faith asks, why me? Mature faith asks, what are you teaching me? Immature faith quits when it gets uncomfortable. Mature faith grows roots in uncomfortable places. And every season of pressure moved you from who you were to who you needed to become. You don't shout like you used to because you've been through too much. You don't react like you used to because pressure taught you restraint. You don't chase validation like you used to because pressure taught you value. And here's the part you must not miss. What came out of you under pressure is what God intends to use. If compassion came out, He's shaping you to heal others. If wisdom came out, He's preparing you to lead. If perseverance came out, He's building you to carry weight others can't handle. If prayer came out, He's calling you into deeper intercession. Whatever surfaced under pressure is not accidental, it's prophetic. You were squeezed so your gift could speak. You were pressed so your oil could flow. You were challenged so your calling could clarify itself. Pressure refined your voice. Pressure sharpened your discernment. Pressure gave your testimony credibility. Now when you speak, you don't speak from theory, you speak from survival. When you encourage others, it's not shallow, it's seasoned. And the reason the pressure didn't destroy you is because God never allows pressure without purpose. He never allows exposure without intention. He never allows the squeezing without a plan for what will be released. You came out of that season different, but you also came out defined. You know what you believe now. You know who you trust now. You know what matters now. So don't curse the pressure. Don't resent the process. Don't regret the season. Thank God for what it revealed. Thank God for what it removed. Thank God for what it released. Because now you know you are stronger than you thought, deeper than you realized, and more anointed than you ever imagined. The pressure showed you who you really are. And now that you know, you'll never walk the same again. Pressure has a way of clearing the room when life gets heavy, when the demands increase, when the weight becomes real. Suddenly, you don't have time for everything you used to entertain. Pressure doesn't ask politely. It forces priorities. And that's exactly why God allows it. Because purpose cannot move forward while distractions are sitting on the throne of your attention. When everything was easy, you could afford to be everywhere, talk to everybody, chase everything. You could say yes without thinking. You could waste time and still feel productive. But pressure changes the math. Pressure makes you count the cost. Pressure asks hard questions like, is this worth my energy? Is this feeding my calling or draining my soul? Is this assignment or is this attachment? And suddenly, things you once tolerated become unbearable. Some people disappeared when the pressure came, not because they were evil, but because they were seasonal. Pressure exposes who is aligned with your assignment and who was only connected to your convenience. When God tightens the pressure, He's not being cruel. He's being surgical. He's cutting away conversations that dilute your focus. He's removing environments that weaken your discipline. He's separating you from habits that feel good but lead nowhere. You didn't lose those things accidentally. They couldn't survive the weight of where you're going. Pressure removes distractions by demanding focus. You can't afford divided attention when your calling is demanding full obedience. God will allow the pressure to increase so you stop entertaining what He never endorsed. Some doors closed, not because you failed, but because they were slowing you down. Some opportunities dried up because they were distractions dressed as blessings. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Some distractions looked spiritual. Some distractions sounded wise. Some distractions were applauded by people who loved you. But they weren't aligned with your assignment. They were good things competing with God things. And pressure is how God resolves that competition. When PR assure rises, you stop chasing applause and start chasing alignment. You stop asking, do they like me? and start asking, did God send me? Pressure matures your decision making. It strips away emotional choices and replaces them with intentional ones. You no longer move because it feels good. You move because it's necessary. Pressure also reveals where your time has been leaking. Under pressure, you suddenly see how much energy was being wasted on arguments that didn't matter, relationships that didn't grow you, cycles that never produced fruit. God lets the pressure expose the cost of distraction so you finally let it go. Not out of bitterness, but out of wisdom. Some of you were too kind to cut things off, too loyal to walk away, too patient to say no. So God allowed pressure to do what comfort never could. Pressure gave you permission to choose yourself without guilt. It taught you that saying no is not rebellion, it's stewardship. It showed you that you cannot carry purpose and distraction at the same time without collapsing. And let's be clear, pressure doesn't just remove people. It removes patterns. It removes procrastination. It removes spiritual laziness. When pressure comes, you stop playing with prayer. You stop being casual about discipline. You stop treating purpose like a hobby. Pressure forces you to show up consistently, not conveniently. You used to multitask your calling. You tried to be everything to everyone. Pressure said, pick a lane. And once you did, your life became clearer. Not easier, but clearer. Purpose always becomes clearer after pressure because distractions thrive in confusion, not clarity. God knows that where He's taking you requires singleness of focus. The next level demands depth, not duplication. Pressure is God's way of narrowing your vision so you can see what actually matters. Wide vision entertains many things. Focused vision accomplishes one thing well. And yes, it hurt to let some things go. It hurt to realize not everyone could come with you. It hurt to admit some dreams were yours, not God's. But pressure gave you the courage to release what was familiar for what was faithful. And that's not loss. That's obedience. Pressure also trains you to guard your inner life. You become more selective about what you listen to, what you watch, what you allow to influence your spirit. Because pressure teaches you that distractions don't always look loud. They sometimes look harmless. And you can't afford harmless when purpose is calling. Notice this. Once distractions fall away, your spiritual sensitivity increases. You hear God clearer. You discern faster. You move with confidence instead of confusion. That's because pressure didn't just remove noise, it restored direction. And the enemy hates focused people. He doesn't need to destroy you if he can distract you. But pressure breaks distraction's grip. It sobers you, it grounds you, it awakens you. You stop drifting and start deciding, God allowed the pressure because purpose needs space to breathe. And distractions were crowding the room. Now you're not surrounded by as much, but you're surrounded. Indeed by what matters. Your circle may be smaller, but it's sharper. Your calendar may be tighter, but it's intentional. Your life may feel heavier, but it's meaningful. Pressure didn't take your joy. It purified it. It didn't shrink your life. It aligned it. And now, with distractions out of the way, purpose can finally move forward with power. That's why God allowed the pressure. Authority is not given to people who have never been tested. Real authority is not conferred by titles, platforms, microphones, or applause. Spiritual authority is forged in places where nobody is watching, where prayers are whispered through tears, where faith has to stand without evidence. And that is exactly why God allows pressure, because pressure is the training ground for authority. You cannot speak with power about what you have never endured. You cannot command storms you have never stood in. You cannot lead people out of darkness if you have never learned how to find God in the dark yourself. Press. Is not meant to break you. It is meant to qualify you. Before you can carry authority, you must first carry weight. And weight always comes before wisdom. God will let you feel the burden so you learn how to lean on Him instead of your own strength. Because authority without dependence becomes arrogance, but authority born from pressure becomes humility with backbone. When pressure hits, it exposes how you respond when you don't have control. And authority is not about control, it's about alignment. Under pressure, You learned how to obey even when it hurt. You learned how to trust even when it didn't make sense. You learned how to stand still when everything in you wanted to run. That is authority being built from the inside out. Some of you had to learn how to pray differently under pressure. Not cute prayers, not scripted prayers, but desperate prayers, honest prayers. Prayers that didn't sound religious but reached heaven anyway. That kind of prayer changes you. It shifts how you speak. It shifts how you move. It gives your words weight because they've been through something. Authority is born when your faith outlasts your fear. Pressure teaches you how to keep believing when the outcome is uncertain. And once you've learned that, fear loses its grip on you. You don't panic like you used to. You don't crumble like you used to. Because pressure trains you to stay rooted while everything around you shook. God does not give authority to people who quit when it gets uncomfortable. He gives authority to people who stay faithful when it gets hard. Pressure showed God and showed you that you could be trusted in the storm, that you wouldn't abandon your assignment just because it got heavy, that you wouldn't curse God just because the process was painful. And here's the truth. Authority grows in proportion to what you survive without losing your character. Plenty of people survive pressure but come out bitter, but you came out better. You didn't let pressure turn you cruel. You didn't let pain turn you prideful. You didn't let delay turn you doubtful. That's authority. Pressure also teaches you discernment. You learn when to speak and when to stay silent. You learn when to fight and when to surrender. You learn when to push and when to wait. Authority is not loud, it's accurate. And accuracy is sharpened through experience. You can tell when someone speaks from pressure because their words carry gravity. They don't exaggerate. They don't need hype. They don't need theatrics. Their presence alone commands respect because their life backs up their language. They've been through too much to speak loosely. Pressure trained you to stand in rooms where you once felt intimidated. You no longer shrink when challenged. You no longer second guess your calling. Because pressure already tested you and you passed. Not perfectly, but faithfully. And let's be clear, the authority God is building in you is not for ego, it's for impact. It's so when you speak, chains break. It's so when you pray, peace enters the room. It's so when you lead, people feel safe. It's so when you correct, people feel loved, not condemned. You don't command demons you fear. You don't influence people you need approval from. Pressure breaks the need for validation. Once you've been stripped of comfort, applause loses its power over you. And that's when authority shows up, when you're no longer moved by opinions. Pressure also gives you authority over yourself. You learn discipline, you learn restraint, you learn consistency, and the greatest leadership always starts inward. If you can't govern your emotions, you can't guide others. Pressure taught you emotional maturity. It taught you how to respond instead of react. Some of you wanted authority without the process, but authority skips no steps. Jesus himself learned obedience through suffering. And if the Son of God had to go through pressure to walk in authority, why would you be exempt? The pressure you survive now gives you credibility. When you say God will make a way, you're not guessing, you've seen him do it. When you say hold on, you're not being polite, you're speaking from memory. When you say this won't break you, you're speaking from experience. That's why people listen to you differently now. That's why your words land deeper. That's why your prayers feel stronger. You didn't just learn scripture, you lived it. And lived truth always carries authority. God allowed the pressure because he is raising your voice, not just your volume. He is increasing your influence, not just your exposure. He is shaping you into someone who can stand firm when others fall away. Authority is not rushed. It is revealed over time. And pressure accelerates maturity. It compresses lessons that would have taken years into moments that transform you forever. You are not weaker because of what you've been through. You are wiser. You are not smaller. You are seasoned. You are not broken. You are built. And now when you speak, heaven listens differently because pressure has trained you. Pressure has refined you. Pressure has authorized you. That is why God allowed it. Responsibility is never handed to people who are you. tested. It is entrusted to those who have proven they can carry weight without dropping it. And that is why God allowed the pressure, not to overwhelm you, but to train you. What's coming into your life is heavier than what you've been carrying, and pressure is God's way of strengthening your capacity before the assignment arrives. You ask God for more influence, more impact, more favor, more opportunity, but you don't step into more without being shaped by preparation. Pressure is preparation in disguise. It stretches you beyond convenience and teaches you how to function when things aren't easy, predictable, or comfortable. Responsibility requires stamina, not excitement, and pressure builds stamina. When life was lighter, you could afford to be casual. You could afford to procrastinate. You could afford to rely on motivation. But pressure changes that. Pressure teaches you discipline. It teaches you how to show up even when you don't feel like it. It teaches you consist. See why when inspiration runs dry and responsibility demands consistency more than talent. God allowed pressure because what He's preparing you for requires maturity. You can't lead people if you haven't learned how to manage yourself. You can't steward influence if you collapse under inconvenience. Pressure taught you how to regulate your emotions, how to think clearly under stress, how to make decisions when the stakes are high. That's training. Some of you learned how to function while tired. You learned how to keep moving while hurting. You learned how to stay faithful when the reward wasn't immediate. And that wasn't random, that was rehearsal. Responsibility doesn't pause because you're overwhelmed. It demands faithfulness even when you're stretched. Pressure trains you to keep going without losing your integrity. God is not impressed by potential alone. He looks for people who can carry what they ask for. Pressure reveals capacity. It shows whether you can handle deadlines, criticism, delay, opposition, and uncertainty without falling apart. And you didn't always get it right, but you grew, you adapted, you learned. That growth is evidence of readiness. Responsibility also requires wisdom, and wisdom is often born from mistakes made under pressure. You learned what doesn't work. You learned who you can trust. You learned how to pace yourself. You learned when to speak and when to stay quiet. Pressure refined your judgment, and refined judgment is essential for leadership. You don't see responsibility the same way anymore. You used to romanticize it. You thought elevation meant ease. Pressure corrected that illusion. Now you understand that responsibility means sacrifice. It means late nights. It means hard conversations. It means standing alone sometimes. And because pressure exposed the cost, you're no longer naive. You're prepared. God allowed the pressure because He's not just giving you blessings, He's giving you burdens. And every blessing worth having comes with responsibility attached. Pressure trained you to manage resources, manage people, manage expectations, and manage disappointment without quitting. That's not punishment, that's promotion training. Some of you had to learn how to carry responsibility without recognition. You did the work when nobody noticed. You stayed faithful when nobody praised you. That season was necessary because responsibility doesn't always come with applause. Pressure taught you to work for purpose, not praise. Pressure also taught you endurance. Responsibility is rarely short-term. It's not a moment, it's a lifestyle. And pressure showed you that you can last longer than you thought. You can stay committed longer than you imagined. You can remain faithful even when progress is slow. Endurance is a prerequisite for long-term impact. God is preparing you for rooms where decisions affect other people's lives. That's why pressure trains you to think before you act, to pray before you move, to seek wisdom before you speak. Responsibility without reflection is dangerous. Pressure slowed you down so you could become thoughtful, not reckless. And let's be honest, some of you wanted the platform without the pressure. You wanted the visibility without the accountability. But God loves you too much to elevate you before you're ready. Pressure kept you grounded while He strengthened your foundation. Because what's built too fast collapses under real responsibility. You've also learned boundaries through pressure. You learned you can't say yes to everything. You learned you can't carry everyone's problems. You learned the importance of rest, structure, and balance. Responsibility without boundaries leads to burnout. Pressure taught you how to steward your energy wisely. God allowed pressure because He's training you to be reliable. Heaven is looking for people who can be trusted. Trusted with influence, trusted with resources, trusted with people's hearts. Pressure tested your reliability, and you showed up. Not perfectly, but faithfully. Responsibility also requires humility. Pressure humbled you. It reminded you that you need God every step of the way. That humility keeps responsibility from turning into pride. It keeps leadership from becoming control. It keeps influence from becoming ego. You are more prepared than you think. What felt like survival was actually training. What felt like delay was development. What felt like stress was strengthening. God was increasing your capacity quietly, steadily, intentionally. Now when responsibility comes, and it will, you won't panic, you won't crumble, you won't run, because pressure already taught you how to carry weight without losing your faith. That's why God allowed it. There comes a moment when pressure exposes a truth you can't avoid anymore. You cannot do this by yourself. And that realization is not weakness, it is wisdom. God allowed the pressure because self-reliance can only take you so far. There are levels of purpose, depth, and power that you will never reach as long as you are depending on your own strength. Pressure is how God lovingly dismantles the illusion of independence and invites you into real dependence on Him. When things were easy, you prayed politely. You prayed when it fit your schedule. You prayed when it felt convenient. But pressure changes the way you pray. Under pressure, prayer stops being a ritual and becomes a lifeline. You stop trying to sound right and start trying to survive. You stop managing God and start clinging to Him. That's not regression, that's growth. Pressure strips away the confidence you placed in people, plans, money, talent, and control. Not because those things are evil, but because they were never meant to be your source. God will allow pressure to touch every false foundation until you realize He is the only one who can hold the weight of your life. And when everything else starts to shake, dependence on God stops being optional. It becomes essence. Some of you discovered that the people you leaned on couldn't carry you through this season. Not because they didn't love you, but because they weren't designed to be your savior. Pressure revealed the limits of human strength so you could discover the sufficiency of divine grace. And that realization hurts at first. It feels lonely. It feels frightening. But it is also freeing, because now you know where your help truly comes from. Pressure teaches you to stop negotiating with God and start trusting Him. You no longer ask Him to bless your plans. You ask Him to order your steps. You no longer demand answers. You ask for direction. Dependence shifts your posture from control to surrender. And surrender is not giving up. It is giving God room to work. Under pressure, you learned how fragile your own strength really is. You learned how quickly confidence can fade when circumstances change. And instead of condemning you for that, God used it to draw you closer. Pressure brought you to the end of yourself so you could finally meet the beginning of God's power in a deeper way. You started leaning on Scripture instead of opinions. You started trusting God's timing instead of your urgency. You started listening more and forcing less. Pressure slowed you down long enough for you to hear God clearly. And in that stillness, dependence was formed. Dependence on God is not passive. It is active trust. It is waking up every day knowing you need Him. It is making decisions with prayer instead of impulse. It is acknowledging your limits without shame. Pressure taught you that you don't have to pretend to be strong when God already is. Some of you fought dependence at first. You wanted to prove you could handle it. You wanted to show resilience without surrender. But pressure kept increasing until pride gave way to prayer. And that moment, when you finally said, God, I can't do this without you, was not failure. It was alignment. God is not trying to make you helpless. He is teaching you to be connected. Branches don't survive by trying harder. They survive by staying attached. Pressure revealed that when you disconnect from God, you dry up. But when you cling to Him, even under strain, you still bear fruit. Dependence also changes the way you see success. You stop taking credit for outcomes and start giving glory for grace. You recognize that every open door, every breakthrough, every moment of strength came from God's hand. Pressure taught you humility without humiliation. It taught you gratitude without guilt. You also learned that dependence brings peace. Self-reliance is exhausting. Trying to control everything drains your soul, but trusting God lifts the burden you were never meant to carry. Pressure forced you to lay things down that were crushing you, and in exchange, God gave you rest. Not because the pressure disappeared, but because you stopped carrying it alone. Dependence sharpens your spiritual sensitivity. You become more aware of God's presence. You notice His guidance. You recognize His voice. Pressure tuned your ear to heaven. When you depend on God, you stop rushing ahead and start walking with Him. And walking with God always leads to places striving never could. God allowed the pressure because where He's taken you requires partnership, not performance. He's not asking you to impress Him. He's inviting you to trust Him. Dependence is how you stay aligned when things don't make sense. It's how you keep moving when clarity hasn't come yet. It's how you remain steady when circumstances are unstable. You learn that God is faithful not just in breakthroughs but in endurance. He sustained you when you felt empty. He strengthened you when you felt weak. He carried you when you couldn't carry yourself. And now, dependence is no longer something you resist. It's something you value. Pressure redefines strength for you. Strength is no longer pretending you're okay. Strength is admitting you need God. Strength is praying when answers are delayed. Strength is trusting when outcomes are uncertain. That kind of strength can only be built through dependence. And here's the beautiful part. Dependence doesn't shrink you. It grounds you. It roots you deeply so you can grow higher. It keeps you steady so success doesn't corrupt you and failure doesn't crush you. God allowed the pressure to anchor you in Him before lifting you into greater purpose. Now you don't panic the way you used to. You don't rush the way you used to. You don't fear the unknown the way you used to. Because pressure taught you something unshakable. God is enough. And when God is enough, you are never truly lacking. That is why God allowed the pressure. Promotion in God is never random and it is never rushed. What looks like sudden elevation to others is almost always the result of unseen pressure endured in private. God allowed the pressure because promotion is not a reward for desire. It is the result of preparation. And preparation always comes wrapped in weight. Pressure is the doorway God uses to transition you from who you were to who you must become. Before He lifts you, He anchors you. Before He expands you, He stabilizes you. Before He promotes you publicly, He tests you privately. Pressure is the gatekeeper that ensures only the prepared step into the next level. You don't get promoted in God by wanting more. You get promoted by carrying more. Pressure measures your capacity. It tests your faithfulness when things are unclear. It examines your obedience when results are delayed. It watches how you handle disappointment, correction, silence, and waiting. Promotion is not about visibility, it's about reliability. God allowed pressure because the next level will expose what the current level could hide. Higher ground comes with stronger winds. Wider influence brings heavier responsibility. Greater favor attracts greater scrutiny. And pressure prepares you so promotion doesn't destroy you. Some people are elevated too quickly and crumble because they were never trained to handle success. God refuses to promote you before your character can sustain your calling. Pressure worked on your integrity. It refined your motives. It checked your ego. It forced you to choose obedience over applause. That is promotion preparation. You had to learn how to win without pride and how to lose without quitting. Pressure taught you both. You had to learn how to stay humble when overlooked and faithful when misunderstood. You had to learn how to trust God when doors stayed closed longer than expected. All of that was shaping you for what's next. Promotion in God is not just about position, it's about perception. Pressure changed the way you see people, power, and purpose. You no longer crave attention, you value impact. You no longer chase titles, you seek alignment. That shift is evidence that promotion is near. God allowed the pressure because elevation magnifies everything. If insecurity is present, promote. On exposes it. If bitterness is hidden, promotion reveals it. If pride is lurking, promotion amplifies it. Pressure came to deal with those things before you step into greater visibility. You learned how to serve without recognition.